The lasagna had been in the oven since 7 in the morning. I remember standing at the kitchen counter that day, watching steam curl off the top layer of cheese, thinking about how my son used to press his face against the oven door when he was small. He called it the bubbling, and he'd stand there in his pajamas just watching it, like it was the most important thing in the world. 43 years old now. Still my boy, I thought. Always my boy. I had been cooking for 3 days. Not just the lasagna. There were 2 pans of roasted potatoes with rosemary, a green bean casserole from scratch, not the canned soup kind, real cream, real shallots, a peach cobbler. I'd started the night before because the crust needs time to rest, and a honey-glazed ham that had been marinating since Tuesday. My kitchen smelled like something out of a memory you didn't know you had, warm and heavy and certain. My birthday was on Saturday, 70 years old. I told myself I wasn't going to make a big thing of it. But then I figured, why not? I hadn't hosted a real dinner in almost 4 years, not since my husband Raymond passed. The holidays after that were quiet things, paper plate things I got through rather than enjoyed. But this year I decided I was going to cook. Really cook. The way I used to when the house was full. My son, I'll call him my son because that's what he is, and that's all that matters. He had promised he was coming. He'd said it in February when I first mentioned it. He said it again in April. 2 weeks before my birthday, I texted him the time, and he sent back a thumbs-up emoji, which isn't the same as words, but I told myself it counted. His wife, I always liked her well enough. She's efficient, that's the word I always settled on. She moves through a room like she has somewhere more important to be, but she's not unkind. She remembered my birthday last year with a greetings card that had a flower on it. A tulip, I think. It arrived 2 days late, but I kept it on the refrigerator for a month. My daughter-in-law's mother lives in Scottsdale. I knew that. I'd known it for years. But I didn't think about Scottsdale on the morning of my birthday, because I was busy sliding the lasagna out of the oven and setting it on the cooling rack and putting on the good tablecloth, the cream-coloured one with the embroidery at the edges that Raymond's mother had given us as a wedding gift. 46 years ago, it still held a crease down the middle from where it had been folded in the drawer. I set 5 places, my son and his wife, their 2 kids, a girl, 8, and a boy who just turned 5, and me. I put the cloth napkins in the napkin rings. I filled the water pitcher. I cut the stems off the grocery store flowers I'd bought Wednesday and arranged them in the blue vase Raymond had picked up at a flea market in Vermont on our 30th anniversary trip. He had terrible taste in furniture, but a good eye for small things. I was just sitting down to wait when my phone rang. I thought it was going to be my son saying he was 20 minutes out, asking if I needed him to stop anywhere. He did that sometimes. It was one of the things about him I loved, that he'd call from the road just to check. It was not that kind of call. He didn't say happy birthday first. I noticed that later, turning it over. He said, "Mom, I need to tell you something," and his voice had that particular flatness it gets when he's reading from something he wrote down beforehand. I've known that voice since he was 11 and had to confess to breaking the back window with a baseball. He said his wife's mother had been asking them for years to come to Scottsdale for a visit during my birthday weekend, which I did not know, that detail about for years, and that they'd finally decided this was the year. The kids had never been to Arizona. His wife really needed to see her mother. It was already booked. He said he was sorry. I sat in the chair at the head of my kitchen table, and I looked at the 5 place settings and I said, "Okay." He kept talking. He said they'd come in a few weeks after things settled down. He said we'd do a belated birthday dinner somewhere nice, my choice of restaurant. He said the kids had made me cards that he'd mail that afternoon. I said, "That sounds fine." We hung up. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that the light in the kitchen shifted. long enough that the lasagna went from warm to room temperature. I kept looking at the blue vase and the embroidered tablecloth and the 5 cloth napkins folded into triangles the way my mother had showed me when I was young, and I thought about how many hours I had been awake. I'd gotten up at 5:30 to start the ham. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't rage. Rage is too clean. It was something slower, something that had been sitting in a quiet corner of myself for longer than I was ready to admit, and the phone call had just finally opened the door to that room. I thought about last Thanksgiving. My son had come, but they'd arrived 3 hours late because they'd stopped at his wife's sister's house first just to drop something off, which turned into staying for pie. The turkey had dried out. I didn't say anything. I reheated everything and set the table again and said it was fine. I thought about my 72nd birthday. Wait, my 68th. The year Raymond died. My son had sent flowers from an app. Beautiful flowers, actually, but he hadn't been able to come because of a work conference in Denver. I understood. Work is real. I wasn't angry about that. But then I thought about something I'd been not thinking about for a while, about the money. Let me tell you about the money because you need to understand this part. 14 years ago, when my son and his wife were just starting out, they were renting an apartment in Columbus that cost more than it was worth, and saving almost nothing because they had student loans and 2 car payments and daycare costs coming. Raymond and I sat at this same kitchen table and talked about it, and we decided to give them money toward a down payment on a house, $40,000, our savings. Raymond said it was the right thing. I believed him. We believed together. 6 years ago, after Raymond died, and I was going through everything, I found out that my son had taken out a private loan 2 years before and had been quietly struggling to make payments on top of the mortgage. He hadn't told us. He was embarrassed, I think. He came to me finally, and I helped. Another $22,000 over 18 months. And then there were the smaller things. The car repair when the transmission went on his wife's SUV, $3,800. The deposit on the kids' private school when they moved to the new district, $2,500. The vacation to the Outer Banks 3 summers ago that I helped cover, because they'd had an expensive year, and I didn't want my grandchildren to miss out. I had never once, not one single time, brought any of this up. I was raised to believe that what you give, you give. You don't hold it over people. You don't keep a ledger. But sitting at my birthday table, alone, with 5 cloth napkins and a full pan of lasagna and flowers in Raymond's blue vase, I found myself doing the math, not to be ugly about it, not to calculate what I was owed, just because my brain needed something to do that wasn't cry. It came to just over $70,000, more if you counted the years of holiday gifts and the birthday checks I sent the grandchildren every year without fail, even when I was watching my own fixed income more carefully than I wanted to admit. $70,000, and he couldn't be bothered to answer the phone before booking flights to Scottsdale. I want to be fair. I know that my daughter-in-law has a mother too. I know that Arizona wasn't chosen to hurt me. I know my son didn't sit down and think, how can I devastate my mother on her 70th birthday? He is not a cruel person. He is something that in some ways is harder to be angry at. He is careless. He is the kind of person who forgets to think about what things cost other people because he was never really asked to. And I let that happen. I know that too. My friend Bet. We've been friends since 1987. We met in a ceramics class neither of us finished. Bet called me that afternoon. She does that. She checks in without being asked. She called and I answered, which I almost didn't, and when she said, "How's the birthday going? Are they there yet?" I couldn't put together a sentence that was a lie. I told her. She was quiet for a moment, which is what she does when she's really listening, and then she said, "Claire, are you sitting at that table by yourself?" I told her I was. She said, "Unlock the front door. I'm bringing wine. Bet arrived 40 minutes later with a bottle of Pinot Grigio and her neighbor Karen, who I'd met a handful of times and liked well enough. And the three of us sat at my kitchen table and ate my birthday lasagna and the peach cobbler and drank wine and talked until almost 11. It was one of the best birthdays I'd had in years, actually. That part is true. But something had changed in me during those hours alone before Bet came. I started looking at things I'd been looking away from. I thought about the last time my son had called me on a Tuesday for no reason, just to talk, the way he used to before he got so busy. I couldn't find a Tuesday. I thought about the last time he'd asked me how I was doing, and then waited long enough after I answered to actually hear it. I thought about my grandchildren's last birthdays, whether I'd gotten so much as a photo sent to my phone after I'd mailed the gift cards. I started to see a pattern, not in a dramatic way, not like a movie where someone suddenly understands everything in a single moment, more like how your eyes adjust when you walk from a bright room into one with the curtains drawn, slowly, until you can see the shapes that were always there. About 3 weeks after my birthday, my son called. He called on a Sunday, which was unusual, and he said they'd had a water heater fail and the basement had minor flooding and they were looking at a repair bill of around $4,000. He mentioned it in that particular sideways way he has when he wants you to offer something without having to ask directly. Mentioned it while saying other things. Let it sit in the conversation like a stone in shallow water. I listened to everything he said, and then I said I was sorry to hear about the water heater. I said that sounded stressful. I asked if everyone was okay. He said yes, everyone was fine. I said, good, I'm glad, and I didn't offer the money. There was a silence, the kind that has a shape to it. He cleared his throat. He said, we're a little tight right now, with the trip and everything. That word, everything, doing a lot of work. I said, I understand being tight. I've been budgeting pretty carefully myself lately, which was true, which was something I'd never said out loud to him before. He said, oh, okay, quietly, like I had answered in a different language. We talked for a few more minutes and hung up. Normal things, weather, the kids. His daughter had a violin recital coming up. I made a cup of tea and sat with it, and I didn't feel guilty. I waited to feel guilty, the way you wait to feel rain that's been forecast. It didn't come. I want to tell you what I did instead of sending that money. The week after the water heater call, I went online and I booked myself a trip, 9 days in Savannah, Georgia, because I'd always wanted to go, and Raymond always said, next year. And next year became the year he got sick, and then there was no next year for us, the way we'd imagined it. I booked a small inn on a street with live oak trees. I bought a pair of walking shoes. I downloaded audiobooks. I told my son I was going on a trip. He said, oh wow, good for you, Mom. Slightly surprised, slightly off balance, the way people sound when something they took for granted has moved. He asked who I was going with. I said, just me. Another pause. I spent 9 days walking around Savannah. I ate at restaurants by myself and read at the table and didn't rush. I went on a walking history tour and talked to a woman from Michigan who was also traveling alone, and we ended up having coffee twice. I sat in Forsyth Park on a Tuesday afternoon and watched the fountain and called Bet on the phone and told her what the air smelled like. Jasmine and something older. History, maybe. I cried once, on the 4th night. Not from sadness, exactly. From something more like grief and relief arriving at the same time. Grieving the years I'd spent making myself small enough to fit into the spaces my son left me. Relieved that I'd finally noticed. When I came back home, my kitchen still smelled faintly of rosemary from the potatoes I'd roasted weeks before. Or maybe I imagined that. Either way, it felt like a message from myself to myself. My son and his family came to visit in November. He didn't mention the water heater money again. His wife was warm in a different way than usual, slightly more careful, like someone who had been told something she wasn't entirely sure she believed. My grandchildren ran into my house like they always do, looking for the drawer where I keep the craft supplies and the shelf where I store the animal crackers. My granddaughter pressed her face against the oven door while the casserole was heating up. "Grandma, why does it do that?" she asked, watching the cheese bubble. "Because it's just right," I said. "That's what it looks like when something's just right." My son was standing in the doorway of the kitchen watching us. I don't know what expression he had. I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at my granddaughter, her nose leaving a small oval of fog on the oven glass, completely absorbed in the simple miracle of melted cheese. I thought about my husband Raymond, standing in that same doorway for 30 years. I thought about the tablecloth with the embroidery. I thought about Savannah and the jasmine and the fountain and the woman from Michigan and the audiobooks I'd listened to on the plane home. I thought about the birthday table I'd set with 5 cloth napkins and eaten at alone. Some things you learn only once, but you learn them all the way through. I don't keep my savings tucked away for emergencies that always seem to belong to other people anymore. I don't fold my plans into the gaps between other people's schedules. I don't wait for a thumbs up emoji and call it a promise. I turned 70 years old at a kitchen table by myself, and somewhere in that silence I remembered that I was a person, not just a mother, not just a resource, not just the woman who knows how to make the crust rest overnight so it comes out right. A person, with a blue vase and walking shoes and 9 more days in some city I haven't chosen yet. I'm thinking about Charleston next, or maybe New Orleans. Bet says she might come with me if I go to New Orleans, and honestly, having company wouldn't be the worst thing. The water heater got fixed, by the way. My son figured it out. They always figure it out when they have to. That's the thing no one tells you about the people you love. They have more capability than they use, right up until the moment they have to use it. I cooked a good meal that birthday. I really did. I just finally learned who to cook it for. I've been thinking about something Bet said to me on the phone from Savannah. I was sitting on a bench in Forsyth Park, watching the fountain, and I said something like, "I don't know why it took me this long." And she was quiet for a second, the way she always is, and then she said, "Because you were too busy making sure everyone else had enough." That's the truest thing anyone has said to me in years. Here's what I know now that I didn't let myself know before. What we give without boundaries doesn't just cost us money or time. It costs us something harder to name. It costs us the part of ourselves that knows our own worth. Every time I wrote a check I didn't mention, every time I reheated the turkey without saying a word, every time I accepted a thumbs up emoji as a promise, I was teaching the people I loved exactly how much they needed to consider me. And the lesson I taught them was not very much. That's not their fault entirely. That's mine. I'm not saying my son is a bad person. He isn't. But people, even the ones who love you, will take exactly as much space as you leave them. Leave all of it, and they'll fill it without thinking. Not out of greed most of the time, just out of the simple human habit of going as far as the path allows. Raymond used to say that a person's character isn't what they do when someone's watching, it's what they do when there are no consequences. I believed that. I still do. But I think there's a second part to it that I missed for a long time. Character isn't only about what you do to others, it's also about what you allow to be done to you. Letting someone treat you carelessly over and over because you love them and you want to keep the peace, that's not grace. That's erosion. Sitting at that birthday table alone was the hardest thing I'd felt in a long time, but it was also the clearest. Some truths only arrive in silence. Some things you can only see when the room empties out, and there's nothing left to look at but yourself. I'm 60 years old, 70 now, and I finally understand that the years I spent pouring myself into spaces where I wasn't truly seen. Those years are gone, and I can't have them back. But the years ahead are still mine to decide about. That's not a small thing. That's everything. What I want for anyone hearing this is not anger at the people who overlooked you. Anger is just grief wearing a harder coat. What I want is the quiet, steady decision to stop making it so easy to be overlooked, to let the people you love figure some things out on their own, to use the money you saved for someone else's emergency on a pair of walking shoes and a plane ticket to a city with jasmine in the air. My granddaughter pressed her nose against my oven door and asked why the cheese does that. I told her, it's what things look like when they're just right. I want to spend the rest of my life on things that are just right, for me, finally,